Hello, my delicious co-creators. Lilu here on the Juicy Living Tour for my very last interview here in London with delicious Becky, and we're going to talk about intuition. Yes!
Yay! Very good.
And this is super hot. This is not quite a common British weather. How are you dealing with that?
I'm doing okay, but I think I'm melting like an ice cream, but it's fine. If I just, it'll be good. The furniture will be fine by the time I leave, I promise.
I love it because you are stand-up intuitive. What does that mean?
Yeah. So when I'm working on stage, I mix live readings on the audience with improv comedy and storytelling. So it's kind of like the double jeopardy of reading people and trying to make them laugh at the same time. And obviously, there sometimes is the occupational hazard. If I say something nice to somebody and then they burst into tears, so you have to pull back the funny from that place. But it's a really good way, especially of couples kind of coming together to come and see a show like that, where the guy's a little bit skeptical and she believes, and so she takes him to the show. And it's great because I sometimes get the guy to kind of come up and rip up, say, a cornflakes packet and throw it on the floor. And I do a reading from the cornflakes packet. And he's all there kind of like, I'm not giving anything away. I'm not even moving my mouth. And the woman's just, laughing her head off. So the whole audience can hear how accurate I'm being, despite the fact that he's got a poker face on. It's very funny. It's very funny. But I have
having this juicy life, don't you?
I do have a juicy life. It's just loads of fun. And I love performing. And I can't do scripted comedy. I'm just terrible. I started out all doing terrible woman kind of boob gags. I was awful. And so actually, improv comedy, working with an audience and getting everyone involved is so much more fun. And I've done it in New York and San Francisco and London and Bristol, and everyone loves it. So even, people say, English humor doesn't translate to America. That's not true. It absolutely does. So yeah, it's really good fun.
But just one thing for sure, fasten your seatbelt, because this is really speedy Gonzalez here in England. No, I love it because it's very stimulating and you get our attention, and I love it. We're going to speak of a very important topic these days. I feel it's one of the most important because in our world, things are going super fast and things happen, and we need to really quickly be sharp, and more than sharp in the brain. Like there's so many options that intuition plays a big role. What is intuition for you? Is there a different definition of intuition? Is there such a thing?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's really interesting what you're saying, because it's all about thinking fast, making decisions. And we are bombarded by information. There is so much information. It used to be that, the people with the information, like the doctors or the used car salesman, you could go to a parking lot now to buy a car, and you probably know more about the one car you want to buy than the poor salesman who has to know something about 20 cars. So we have so much information that we need to discern, because not all of it's right for us. So we need to be able to discern what's absolutely right for who we are. So this is where this new revolutionary intuition comes in, because what we were doing before was working mainly with the gut, but in actual fact, intuition comes from the heart as well. So let me explain how the brain works. So, not completely, I'm not a neuroscientist, I'm just a brain enthusiast. I think everyone should have a brain. And not everyone does. And
let's turn it on right now.
So the left hemisphere of the brain sees things in parts. So if the left hemisphere of the brain was looking at these beautiful roses, it would see the petals and the stem and the leaves and perhaps the little lines on the leaves and the veins and the water, but it wouldn't be able to see the whole vase and the flowers. It would see it completely in parts. But it could communicate it, and it could say, hey, these flowers are beautiful and they're plucked from a rose bush and that grows in the garden. And now the right hemisphere of the brain can't communicate. So it has no way of explaining the flowers. However, it sees them as a whole, so it doesn't see them in parts. Now, if you think about all of the things that we do in the world and how we break down our decisions, we break them down with the left hemisphere of the brain. We might even write a list of for and against. We analyse, we logically summarise. This can take a long time. In actual fact, 95% of the thoughts you're having today, you had yesterday. How boring are we? Really, You know, if it's the same thing I'm thinking, I don't want to be in my own company because I hate having the same story told to me twice. So I must be doing my own head in and just not realizing it. So when we are thinking and overthinking and analyzing, it's pretty darn exhausting. That's a heck of a lot of energy to be using up. Now, the right hemisphere of the brain is our seat of intuition, and it knows. It might not be able to put it into words, so we can't analyse it and take it apart, but it knows. So it might be having an idea for a project or something like that. When people say sleep on it, it's because the right hemisphere of the brain that has no words has actually had a chance to step forward and come up with the idea. Because while the logical mind is going on, which is the looking at things in parts, the right hemisphere of the brain doesn't get the opportunity to download the intuition that it's receiving. And intuition can only be received. You can't go out and get it. You know, you just, it's not like, you know, getting a cafe latte. It's like you can't go out and get it. You actually have to put yourself in a space where you can receive it. And it can be received in one of 4 ways, which I would call intuitive types. There is somatic intuition, which is what your body knows. I get that from dancing in my living room, or anywhere, you know, anywhere in the street, anywhere. So if I'm dancing, like my body has the opportunity while my brain is going, don't fall over. My right hemisphere of the brain is able to listen to what the body is trying to tell me, because the downloaded information is stored in our cells, it's in held muscles, it's in all sorts of different places. And when we're dancing or moving or playing golf or martial arts or qigong or running or whatever, we actually have this opportunity for our brain to allow it to come into our consciousness, what it is that we already know in our body. The other one is our emotions, or people say empathy. So it's how we feel about something. But again, sometimes people get confused and think that intuition is your feelings. It's not your feelings. Your feelings are a gateway to knowing your intuition. So again, and we'll talk about the gut in a moment, but you might have the feeling of moving away from something, or the feeling of feeling excited and moving towards it. And
The boys.
the boys. And that will be our emotions and how we feel, like, you know, or even just about people. You'll kind of go, oh, I'm not sure about that person, or someone else, you kind of like, you're boinging in an excited way to kind of go and talk to them. Then there is spiritual intuition, which is what we feel in our aura or our chakras or just our energy system at large. And the people who are often very spiritually intuitive are accused of being ungrounded. So people say, you need to ground, you need to get into your body, because they're kind of like seen as being way out there. They're sort of like off floating with the angels and things like that. And then the other form of intuition is mental intuition. So it's what we know in our mind, as I've described, the right hemisphere of the brain. So there is somatic, emotional, mental, and physical. No, missed one. Somatic, emotional, mental, and spiritual. So those 4 can work combined, and some people will find that they're better at one thing than another. So actually what you're good at in the real world, in terms of the multiple ways in which we know what we know, I tend to be one of these people who, if I see the sign wet paint, how long has it been there? Is it still wet? It might not still be wet. It might be an old sign, and oh yeah, that's still wet. You know, I have to experiment. I have to know. So I will know by, my body needs to know, my brain needs to know, and I'm quite an emotional person, so I'll know things on the emotion. The spiritual side, not so much. It just doesn't resonate with me. It's not my thing. So that's how I break down life. I'm always like looking for how I can help someone. So I'm always reading their emotions. I'm always like thinking about stuff. I overanalyze. That's why I wrote You Do Know, so that I could actually explain how things work to left hemisphere people. And I'm always in my body. I'm just constantly like, oh, how do my feet feel? How are my knees? I'm fascinated by the physical side of myself and of other people, but let's not go there. So that's really how intuition breaks down. So how the gut responds to things is using the spiritual intuition, which is the solar plexus. There's obviously a lot more than the solar plexus of spiritual intuition, but your spiritual intuition will work through the solar plexus, and it will literally frisk people, buildings, situations for information to see whether or not the world is a safe place or not. And it brings that information into the sacral chakra. Now, quite often, if you're one of the unfortunate people like myself who has what's known as a muffin top, If you are someone who frisks too much in the world for information, for me, I call it an occupational hazard. But for other people, it might be that they frisk information because they don't feel safe. They don't feel that they can trust themselves to make good decisions, or they don't believe that they can trust other people. So they're constantly reading the world. And then, of course, the more information that they're bringing into the sacral chakra, the body will create, let's just call it matter, because we're not going to use the word fat. We'll just call it matter. It creates matter above the genes, which is blocking the information from bombarding the gut. Now, what's amazing is there is actually a brain in the gut. And this is not a metaphor. There is the brain in the gut, and it's got the same kind of vagus nerves and matter and things that is the same as the brain in the head. And so the gut brain works very much with our flight and fight responses. So that's why we call it an instinct. So the main part of it used to be that it was for avoiding predators. So we could intuitively know whether or not there was say, for example, a saber-toothed tiger behind a bush. We would know it was there so that we didn't get killed. So it was our knowing for finding water. It was our knowing for finding shelter. And of course, indigenous cultures have always used it as a hunting tool, or a tool for running away from being hunted. And so nowadays we're using...
Forgetting.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, and nowadays we're using it as a tool of... am I going to get this job? Am I safe in the world? Oh my God, there's an email in my inbox. Is it going to be scary? It's the brown letter that's come through the door. It's the bill. It's whatever it is. And so the fight or flight responses are really connecting us with constantly this fight or flight. And why that's a problem is because the gut, in its reaction to the predator, be it the email, it sends blood to the arms and legs so that we can run away or fight. And it's supposed to happen very quickly because, well, you're dead or you made it. And so there really isn't much in between. However, now what we're doing is there's always another email, there's always another thing. So the blood is staying in the arms and legs a little too long. So we are ending up with stomach complications because the blood was doing something very useful. It was helping the digestive system. So sometimes people end up with IBS if they've got a very active solar plexus. And also they can have a weakened immune system. So we know often after a period of stress that we feel, exhausted, or our immune system is low. So I came up with this realization that couldn't be the only form of intuition that was available to us, one that was actually making us sick, because we're worrying, we're constantly intuitively reading everything, and we're constantly in a state of fear or running away. So the second place there is a brain, apart from the one in your head, which is the third brain, is in the heart. So we actually have, again, the same kind of vagus nerves and information that you have in the gut and in the head. You actually have it in your heart. So the heart interprets the world, but the heart interprets the world like the right hemisphere of the brain. The gut interprets the world like the left hemisphere of the brain. So the heart interprets the world without words. And how we know that we are having an intuitive insight is the feeling that it connects. So the feeling is not the intuitive insight, but we have a feeling and we go, I feel expansive, or I feel that that's a yes. And it's quick. It's really, really quick. And it has to be quick. And this is why the book is called You Do Know, Learning to Act on Intuition Instantly. Because the minute you think, it's probably wishful thinking, it's probably this, it's probably that, then we've lost the moment. And so when we suddenly feel this expansive knowing that I have to do this. So the last time this happened to me, because believe me, I walk my talk. The last thing that happened to me of a huge nature that's worth kind of commenting on, I have it with small things all the time, but with a huge thing was the knowing I needed to move to San Francisco. Now, at the time, I was a radio show host on a big station in London, so that was going really great. I was fully booked with students and clients. It was crazy time to kind of go. And the recession had just started to hit. So my house had just dropped in price. And I knew I had to sell the house and go to San Francisco and be a student, because I knew there was something that I was missing, but I didn't know what it was. And secretly, I think I thought it was the boyfriend. I think I thought I was going to move to San Francisco, meet the love. That didn't happen. So because you put it in your brain, don't you? Because you go, I get this intuitive. And in order to stop the panic, you're trying to interpret it because your heart's going, yes, I need to do this. And then you're thinking, no, why? And you're like, it's to meet a man. But it was just my head trying to fill in some blanks, because this is a huge deal. I have a dog.
Stepping in the unknown.
For sure. And I have a dog, so I had to take the dog on the flight, and I gave away all my stuff. So I did a whole Wayne Dyer, apart from I didn't call the secretary and ask him to collect, and I had to do it myself, packing my own boxes and taking it to the second-hand shop myself. I'm not moaning, but yes. And so I gave everything away apart from two.
The A-house author don't all have the same right?
Not quite yet. We're working on it, and we're working on buying the stuff back. And so gave everything away, and I'm like, right, okay, that's it. I'm going to San Francisco, sold the house, and in actual fact, I would have continued to lose on paper the same amount of money I spent on the degree, because the house just kept going down and down and down and down in price as the recession got deeper and deeper and deeper. And so, of course, then you're like, yeah, I knew it. Although you don't know it in words, but you know it in feelings. And then, of course, the book you do know was birthed in San Francisco. It wouldn't have come up. I wouldn't have realised that there were two forms of intuition, and I wouldn't have come up with a revolutionary idea that I actually believe will change the world. Because by using your heart-led intuition, you don't fear people, you become curious about them, and then we can actually come together in community and solve so much of the crisis that we're going through at the moment, simply because we're terrified of other human beings and we're consumed with what about me instead of what about we. Mm-hmm.
So this is mainly where you check now, or you have it always? It's always both, or always at work. How do you put this in practice?
Well, I'll still get kind of like that gut instinct of, oh, that doesn't feel right. And people describe it as like my stomach goes tight, or my stomach's in knots, so I've got butterflies in my stomach. They're all talking about reactions of the gut brain. So when you're talking about that, I'll still have those, but I become curious about them. And quite often what I find, especially if I don't like someone and I have a bad reaction to somebody, when I become curious, it will be an aspect of them that reminds me of me, something that I don't like about me, or an aspect of them that I wish I was more like. So it might be, oh, that person's really like just, oh, they're so strong and la, 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 I think they're demonstrative, blah, blah, blah. And it's actually because I'm not strong enough, or I'm not stepping into my power. So I'll become curious, and then by becoming curious, I'll go, oh, yeah, I'm not stepping into my power. I'm being all kind of like whimsical instead of this person that I'm judging, but actually they're reflecting something very useful back about me. And so it's quite similar to kind of like Byron Katie's The Work. You suddenly become really clear at seeing the work, because by becoming curious, you see what it is in other people that they're reflecting back to you about yourself. So I will still have gut reactions to things, but by using my heart, I can interpret much better what the reaction is about. Is it about my psychology? Or is it about, actually, yes, that person really is a rat bag? 9 times out of 10, the person is not a rat bag. It's all about my psychology and my stuff that is making that person threatening, because it's usually about my own lack of self-belief. Yeah. So by using my heart, I can also make really excited decisions about things. So that can be work products and business products that I'll suddenly go, I'm going to do such and such. And then people kind of go, that's really illogical. Like, how are you going to? And I'm like, I don't know. I just need to do it. Like the crazy idea about moving to San Francisco, I'll suddenly just, sometimes it's just waking up at 3 a.m. with this, oh, that's brilliant, and getting excited about something. Or I might meet someone and feel excited about them. I really want to work with them. And you're like, well, on paper, they are not the person to work with. They haven't got the skills. But in your heart, you're like, yeah, but, we'll make such great collaborators. And so using that heart intuition really allows you to kind of to know who to trust and to know who to move away from. Not because there's anything wrong with them, but it might be that there's not a resonance there.
Yeah. And then it's about dealing with the no's. Or speaking those no's, which is not, when we follow our intuition, I feel we're saying more no's than yeses.
When you're following your gut, you're definitely saying more no's than yeses, because that's what the gut instinct does. The gut instinct works so much with the ego, and the ego's main job is protecting you from the saber-toothed tiger. Well, I haven't seen one recently, but, it's protecting you from pain. It's protecting you from hurting the physical body. So it's useful. Heck, I'm not going to walk out in front of a car, and that's my ego saying, do not walk out in front of a car. So my ego is about protecting the physical body, but really, do I really want to be so protected? Because protected is closed. So in actual fact, the heart tells me all about the great things I could be doing and the great people I could be involved with and all of these exciting lives. So again, another example is I met, well, this has happened twice. One was a lady that I did a consultation with, and she invited me out out to Pakistan. I'd met her once. I got on a plane. I went out to Pakistan, and it was just at the tail end of, just at the beginning of Ramadan, and I'm basically doing consultations and teaching and meeting all of these people. And this is just after September the 11th. Even the security guard, when I'm boarding the flight, said, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, exactly. I mean, I didn't tell the security guard that. Can you imagine? He'd probably grabbed me by the back of my head and said, "I'm not letting you get on the plane." And of course, I had the most wonderful week. It was fantastic. Another time was I went out to Chile, and I went out to Chile to teach. Same thing. Met a guy this time. So like, it's usually a bit like, oh, you don't go off with strange men. I do. So met a guy. I get picked up at the airport by him and his friend. They drive me 45 minutes outside of Santiago. I only realised sitting on the plane when you actually have to fill out the customs form and you actually have to state where you're staying that I don't know where I'm staying and I have no idea where I'm going. So I'm sitting in a car going 45 minutes outside of kind of Santiago, and then I suddenly hear my mother's voice. "Make sure you give me the address of where you're staying." "Oh, yeah, I forgot." "Oh, because, you could be lying in a ditch and we'd never find you again because you don't know where you could end up." And it's not until I'm sitting in the back of the car and I went, "Oh, yeah, I suppose I should be worried about this." I had a wonderful couple of weeks. I went back the following year and I've got regular clients in Chile now. I have a really great time every time I go. But people just don't do that because they're worried about being sold for camels or something. People, I don't think there's many camels.
Not in Chile.
Exactly. But, but people are really worried about, something bad's going to happen to you. Maybe, but also you could have a really amazing time. And how many things have you said no to because the little voice in your head has said, be careful? Oh, I mean, apart from you go everywhere.
I have to say no's. I see all those no's, though, and that's a good thing. So that I can be the yeses and really choose those destinations, those interviews that I really want to do. So I see how intuition is something also. Is that like a muscle? I feel like it's like a muscle, though you're saying it in the heart and in the gut, but I feel the more you practice it, the more it grows.
Yeah, I absolutely think the more you practice it, the more it grows. Because in actual fact, what happens is the more you practice it, the more it diminishes the voice in your head. The more it diminishes your fear, the more it diminishes your analytical mind. Although you can still analyse, it doesn't make you stupid. But it's more the right hemisphere of the brain becomes imbalanced over the left because the left hemisphere of the brain is the brain we're taught to use at school. So when I was studying math, you were asked to work out your calculations. And so to me, I believe that intuition is a benefit that is caused by dyslexia. So I would go to my math teacher with my answers. He'd go, "Yeah, these are all correct, but where are your workings out? I want to see your workings out." And I said, "Well, the numbers that glow white, they are the ones that..." And he went, "What?" I said, the numbers with the white ring round, the ones that glow white." And he went, "Numbers don't glow white, Becky." And I went, "This is how I did my workings out." And he said, "Okay, never tell anyone that ever again." He said, "Don't tell anyone that numbers glow white." So very interestingly, I studied at California Institute of Integral Studies. And part of my degree was math. And I failed my math with ungraded. I mean, they couldn't even grade it. I failed it so badly. And so I was a little kind of panicked. But what they were doing with math in archetype and nature. And then all of the circles I could see around the numbers, they went, "Yeah, that makes sense. That's okay. You're seeing patterns." And I'm like, "Yeah, I see patterns because I-type dyslexics see patterns. And so I can do math by seeing patterns in things." My consultations are all about the fact that I hear the world as if it's making music, and I hear human beings like they're making sounds. And most people do. They call it the vibe. Somebody's vibration, somebody's sound. They might say someone's light-hearted. You're talking about the frequency of do, which is fear, all the way up to do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, but probably more in tune. So the higher frequencies are like the closer you are to love, and the lower frequencies, the closer you are to fear. So when I'm listening to people and whether or not they're in tune or out of tune, I then put patterns together from other psychological things I have studied. people's medical conditions that I've studied. So I listen for what is in tune and out of tune, and then I put the pieces together by, in a sense, seeing patterns in everything in the same way that other people see maths. I see patterns in everything in that way. So someone with Asperger's, and I always think of Rain Man, the film, where Tom Cruise is taking the character with Asperger's syndrome to go to a casino to win loads of money because he's amazing at remembering numbers. Well, I have the opposite problem. Terrible with numbers, brilliant with communicating with people and intuitively reading people. So this really is a brain ability that's caused by a brain, what's considered to be an abnormality, which is dyslexia. But in actual fact, we all have a right hemisphere of the brain. It's just that the way I hear the world is through the dyslexic ears instead of hearing the world through the school brain that we're taught to think with, which is actually one aspect of how we know everything that we know.
Last little question regarding spirit guides. Is it something that you use, something that you work also with, or
Nope. And the reason being, and I did, so I actually got really quite well known as, the go-to girl for spirit guides. But in actual fact, I was so curious as to where are these beings guiding us? Like, what is that all about? And you might hear it as a voice in your head that's not your speaking voice. Well, we have things known as subpersonalities or archetypes of the mind. So the frightened child, the pleaser, the critic, all of these different archetypes. And you can create an archetype that is a spiritual teacher or a spirit guide. So I started to think, well, have I just created a team load of archetypes here? And in actual fact, I mean, they're very clever. They seem smarter than me. But in actual fact, are they smarter than me? But they are part of a smartness of me. And then when I started to really look at the psychology of the way that the brain works and our need for comfort and security, I started to realize I was giving my power away, and also I was creating specialness. So I'd say to a client, my guide is telling me to tell you, blah, blah, blah. And the person would go, oh, well, if it's coming from your guide or coming from my guide, it must be super important then. But really, is it? Or am I just telling you that and now you think I'm really amazing because I can talk to guides and you can't? So there was a them and us being created. And I didn't like that. My job is to empower my client. That's why the book is written, You Do Know, because usually at the end of a session, people go, thank you, that's so reassuring because I knew that. And so it's more about how can you believe in yourself? So I started to kind of become curious and ask guides, where are you guiding me? So then I went through a series of what you might call vibrational leaps. So I went from the egoic leap of understanding guides as being people into the next leap of understanding guides as being consciousness, into the next leap of understanding guides to being love, into the realization that I was no different from that, and that the oneness is love or universal energy, or if you want to call it God. And in actual fact, it's almost as if we are all drops in the ocean. The only way to understand what the ocean is to become a drop. But you are still the ocean. You're just being a drop. So you are still God experiencing what you're not by being a drop. And then you will go back when you die to being a drop in the ocean. So I kind of call it the consciousness soup. So we go back into this consciousness soup. So in actual fact, we take like a library book out of the consciousness soup, and then in our heads we translate it into being physical. So we go, okay, so this book of consciousness is a guide, and the guide is saying this. Or this book of consciousness is a dead person, and I'm a medium, and that person's saying this. You are hearing an echo of a lifetime, and it may be a superior lifetime. This is why they're always American Indians. It may be a superior lifetime. It may be a bricklayer from Essex. It could be anything. But the point is you have access in the collective consciousness to the entirety of the soup, because you are a droplet in the world of soup. So rather than giving away your power, it's to go, it's all in me. And if it's all in me, all I need to do is keep accessing the part of me that remembers being the ocean, instead of keeping on thinking I'm the land and that I'm not the ocean. And I keep looking out to the ocean, longing to be at one with the ocean, only to realize that I'm actually the drop that's on the land, but I'm not the land.
Beautiful. Becky, I've so enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much. The name of your book again?
It's called You Do Know, Learning to Act on Your Intuition Instantly, and it's out with Hay House.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this all this information. I'm going to apply it right away. My delicious co-creators, I know you have enjoyed this. Isn't it exciting? A little bit different. I love it. Those British definitely have something. I have to come back more often in London.
Weather. We have the weather.
They do.
Just today. Just today.
Just for today. Just for you, my delicious co-creators. Big, big kisses. Thank you for your support. Thank you for spreading these videos. And thank you for your support again, and again. Big, big kisses. Much love. Bye-bye.
When I'm working on stage, I mix live readings on the audience with improv comedy and storytelling. So it's kind of like the double jeopardy of reading people and trying to make them laugh at the same time. And obviously, there sometimes is the occupational hazard if I say something nice to somebody and then they burst into tears. So you have to pull back the funny from that place. But it's a really good way, especially of couples kind of coming together to come and see a show like that, where the guy's a little bit skeptical and she believes, and so she takes him to the show, and it's great because I sometimes get the guy to kind of come up and rip up, say, a cornflakes packet and throw it on the floor, and I do a reading from the cornflakes packet, and he's all there kind of like, you know, I'm not giving anything away, I'm not even moving my mouth, and the woman's just laughing her head off.
Hello, my delicious co-creators. Lilou here on the Juicy Living Tour for my very last interview here in London with delicious Becky, and we're going to talk about intuition. Yes!
Yay, very good.
And this is super hot. This is not quite a common British weather. Huh? How are you dealing with that?
I'm doing okay, but I think I'm melting like an ice cream, but it's fine. If I just, it'll be good. The furniture will be fine by the time I leave, I promise.
I love it because you are stand-up intuitive. What does that mean?
Yeah. So,
and I love it. We're going to speak of a very important topic these days. I feel it's one of the most important because in our world, things are going super fast and things happen and we need to really quickly be sharp, and more than sharp in the brain. Like there's so many options that intuition plays a big role. What is intuition for you? Is there a different definition of intuition? Is there such a thing?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's really interesting what you're saying because it's all about thinking fast, making decisions. And we are bombarded by information. There is so much information. It used to be that, the people with the information, like the doctors or the used car salesman, you could go to a parking lot now to buy a car and you probably know more about the one car you want to buy than the poor salesman who has to know something about 20 cars. So we have so much information that we need to discern because not all of it's right for us. So we need to be able to discern what's absolutely right for who we are. So this is where this new revolutionary intuition comes in, because what we were doing before was working mainly with the gut, but in actual fact, intuition comes from the heart as well. So let me explain how the brain works. So, not completely, I'm not a neuroscientist, I'm just a brain enthusiast. I think everyone should have a brain. And not everyone does. And
let's turn it on right now.
So the left hemisphere of the brain sees things in parts. So if the left hemisphere of the brain was looking at these beautiful roses, it would see the petals and the stem and the leaves and perhaps the little lines on the leaves and the veins and the water, but it wouldn't be able to see the whole vague. So the whole audience can hear how accurate I'm being, despite the fact that he's got a poker face on. It's very funny. It's very funny. But I have
having this juicy life, don't you?
I do have a juicy life. It's just loads of fun, and I love performing. And I can't do scripted comedy. I'm just terrible. I started out all doing terrible woman kind of boob gags. I was awful. And so actually, improv comedy, working with an audience and getting everyone involved is so much more fun. And I've done it in New York and San Francisco and London and Bristol, and everyone loves it. So even, people say, English humor doesn't translate to America. That's not true. It absolutely does. So yeah, it's really good fun.
But just one thing for sure, fasten your seatbelt, because this is really speedy Gonzalez here in England. No, I love it because it's very stimulating, and you get our attention.